Hey, Believe to See listeners! It's time for Advent and Christmas, but it's also time for end-of-year fundraising. The Anselm Society and Believe to See are run on donations from people like you, and we are trying to raise $10,000 by the end of the year. If you enjoy the show, please head over to believetosee.net and make a gift. Your one-time or monthly gifts make the show possible, and right now we'd love to make some investments to improve a few things. We can't do it without your support. Even the smallest gift makes a difference. Thank you so much and enjoy the show.
Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and the comparative merits of the West Virginia Mountaineers and the South Africa Springboks. At a corner table by the fire are two people. One of them is saying that he does feel a lot of Big 12 conference loyalty, but he also has a really cool Springboks jersey in the back of his closet. And that's me, Matthew Mellema, and welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to help you to connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories in order to understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. So longtime listeners will know that one of our show's greatest friends is SD Smith, or Sam Smith, as we call him when he's at Anselm conferences. He's been a guest multiple times on this podcast to talk about his Green Ember series. He's talked about the Jack Zulu series that he's writing with his son, and he's also been a very well-beloved speaker at our Anselm conferences. Now, he has a new book out, brand new, and I am super excited to talk to him about it for a number of reasons. It's a middle grade adventure story focusing on a group of boys that touches on a lot of very complex issues. Racial tension, forgiveness, reconciliation, just to name a few. The author is SD Smith. The book is The Found Boys, and SD, or Sam, is joining us at the table now. So, I think we've had this conversation before. When we're just talking, you're at an Anselm conference or something, you're Sam. When I'm talking about you as the author, you are SD. When you're joining us at the pub table, what should we go with, SD or Sam?
Oh, man. How about old Baldy?
All right.
I think, hey, Egghead. I don't know. I think if we're getting really, really familiar, yeah, Smitty. Hey, Smitty. That's
Smitty.
a very... Smitty was a really common nickname for people named Smith when I was growing up. Everybody was Smitty.
Did you ever get stuck with Smitty?
No, I never did. I never stuck. But there's a lot of us Smiths around, so I managed to dodge that bullet. But Smith, Michael W. Smith's from the same town I'm from, and he's Smitty, so I can see why he got that. I'll just tell you that.
Just has Smitty vibes. I really like that.
Yeah.
All right, so. Like I mentioned, folks, we are here to talk about his brand new book, The Found Boys, and I have a lot of questions about it. I think this is a fascinating book. I'm so glad that he wrote it. But first off, before I get to my questions, let's let the author talk about it. So, Sam, Smitty, what would you say your book is about? What's the elevator pitch?
Oh, man, I didn't know I was going to be put on this. I didn't know that in this interview there were going to be questions. I
like to keep my guests on their toes. Yeah.
I'm curious. I'll be contacting my people and have them contact your people and really, really yell at them. Man, the Found Boys. It's a story. It's so funny because it's about boys, but it's a story that started like a lot of my stories did with my own kids. My daughter, in fact, the Found Boys started as a story I told my daughter, and it's a story about it's set in the creek behind the church where I was a child. When I was 12 years old, we moved to South Africa. But before that, I lived in West Virginia in Appalachia, and behind our church there was this creek. We had a swing set, and I always loved this idea of the creek and the possibilities. And something was magical about this church creek because we could play down there. We build like forts and kind of things in the sand and the rocks, and we would kind of explore in that area. But then we would start to kind of go up the creek a little bit, and we would go up one way and down the other, and we would build dams and this kind of stuff and go on adventures. but there was always this kind of time when it was like, okay, our parents are done talking in the parking lot, and it's time to kind of go. So there was always like, well, what else is up there? Like, what else is up? When you're little, you don't know. Like, what kind of, there was a farm up here. What's beyond the farm? What's up there? And so that was always like a big sort of pregnant place for me in my imagination. And so I started this story like very similar to like my own experience, but then even though the kids are kind of different and even the point of view character is a little bit different than me, shares some things with me, but he's different. But then, what would happen if you just kept going up the creek? And so that's where the story started. It was very open. And then it became this story about friendship across these divides, these church and sort of racial, cultural sort of divides. Became the story about friendship, but it really just started very organically with my daughter. And it's funny because when the book came out, or when it was getting ready to come out, there was a draft, and I was sharing it with. I was like, "Hey, can you read this?" I'm begging people, how it is, like to give it a read. One of those people is my daughter. She was 12 years old, and she's like, "Daddy, this is like the story you told me." And I was like, "Oh yeah," I had almost like forgotten that this story started with her. But yeah, just much like the Green Ember stories, it started at home. But there's some similarities and some significant differences between this story and the other stories I've told. But I think it ends up being a story about friendship, about reconciliation, about love. Like a lot of my stories are, but yeah, I don't know if does that work? That was not an elevator. That was like a 10-minute bus ride.
It was a long elevator, so like for a tall building, that works perfectly well.
I was assuming that the elevator would break down at some point. And we had a long time to talk. Yeah.
So you've been on the podcast before to talk about the Green Ember, talk about Jack Zulu, and there are clear elements of you and your background that you can find throughout those books. But it seems like this book in particular really gets sort of personal for like your background, how you grew up. Would that be fair to say?
I think so. Yeah, it really does. It's the setting is very familiar to me. I mean, it is home. It is my childhood. It is for sure. And then because of my experience, partly because of my experience in South Africa and before, it's personal to me, and it's a topic I care a whole lot about. Because of, the first church I was ever a member of was a Zulu church. So I was a minority and I was 13 years old. I was in South Africa, Madadani Bible Church, and it was this beautiful, faith community. And I think my experience of being so tied in with particularly Zulu people, and then coming home and seeing like, oh, we have these divides too here. And I just always tried to understand like what's going on here, what's happening, and like why are Sunday mornings, some of the most segregated times in our culture, and sort of contrasting that with this vision of the future where every tribe and tongue will be together, and this reality that Christianity, I'm a Christian, that Christianity is the most diverse movement in history by far, and I love that. And it's just like the pain of that not being fully realized in the ways that it should and will. I think leads to a lot of the tension in the story. And I think that is personal to me, just because, I care and sort of always have since I was pretty little, and so it is a lot of my heart coming out in it.
Yeah, and let's talk about that theme of racial tension, reconciliation, because I've seen videos you've done explaining these themes. You are, I'm sure you are acutely aware that this is kind of a risky topic to do in our very charged climate, where I'm sure you're expecting to get some very grumpy feedback from folks on, both sort of extremes of the political spectrum. So what made you decide that these themes and this message was worth the risk?
I didn't think about it when I was writing. So my writing is really, I don't think a lot about like issues or messages or that sort of thing. The writing is pretty pure, and the storytelling is pretty pure. I was trying to give a good gift to my daughter. So I wasn't thinking like, how do I address this topic? It's always in retrospect, like looking back and being forced to. And that happened with my other books as well, like having to sort of almost when you have to share about it, like when you get the opportunity to share about it, that people need some connections to it. And so you have to think like, oh, okay, what's really the story about? So it took me a long time to figure out what the Green Ember was really about. And because I just wrote it. I wrote it as a kid, and I was trying to write a great story for my kids. That was but now looking back and hearing obviously from a lot of people their feedback, I'm like, oh, I get what's connecting to people. So I'm getting a little bit better at recognizing that after the fact. But sort of retroactively, like looking at it, what I feel like is important and is at the heart of it is hopefulness. And I think part of the reason why it's so risky, and I do expect to be, pilloried by different folks for this, just because you can't say anything. You can't say the sky is blue without getting a lot of angry comments. But for the people who are not too far gone in sort of like political, cultural sort of religion, my hope is that this would be a hopeful story for them. At the heart of it, what I think is frustrating about the current moment is the fact that it does feel very, very hopeless. It does feel very difficult to like. Well, I know for myself, I feel oftentimes like, what can we do? Like, it's so exasperating. Like, it doesn't feel like if especially if you care. I think it's easy, it's almost easier if you just kind of switch off and say like, that's all ridiculous. I don't care about it. I don't want to, everybody that's talking about reconciliation is just trying to do, there's all this agenda. And that so many of the loud voices are like that. And there's this hopelessness that like, there's no solution. That just whatever we do, we've got this original sin in our country of slavery and racism, and there's just no going back from that. You will forever be polluted. Every person who has lighter skin is always polluted by this taint of guilt, regardless if you have a personal or familial connection. Doesn't matter. If your great grandfathers could have fought for the Union and been abolitionists, and still many times you feel like this cultural guilt, and there are those who say you should just always just be recognized your privilege and all that kind of stuff. So there's this sort of, and then there's folks who feel like, oh, there's a perpetual victimhood. There's a perpetual, that there's no, if I am a black person in this country, I will never have a chance. There's no hope. And so there's this paralyzing, polarizing hopelessness and a frustration of saying like, I don't even know what to say. I'm not even allowed to talk. I don't know what to say. If I say something, it's going to be wrong. And what's right this week might be wrong next year. And so I'll get in trouble. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to act. Even if my heart is full of love, I don't know what to say. And so I don't like that. And I really think that many of the political social solutions are perpetuations of the problem. And I believe that what's so strong, even in American Black culture, is this tradition of the Black church. And that's true for a lot of white folks too, obviously. And I just think that I believe that the answers are in Christianity, in the church, and in us being who we are. And I think that if we are who we say we are, who we believe we are, I think that's the best hope for reconciliation. Does that solve every problem? If you read Frederick Douglass, like he would say some of the religious slave masters were the worst. And so I'm not saying, just come to church, everything will be fine. Like, I understand that there's problems there too, for sure. And we have a bad history there in a lot of ways, but I think that's I think that following Christ is the way, and heroic characters who are brave enough to be forgiving, who are brave enough to see the big picture, which I think in the book you have this character of Reverend Jones, who's this very, very brave, very, very has a lot of clarity, has a lot of moral clarity, but he also has this big heart for forgiveness and this big vision for reconciliation, which takes practical kind of steps. And it's a lot about like people getting in line with him. And is it everything perfect? No, not perfect, but it's a little bit of a vision for like a hopeful future. And I need hope. Like I want to know, like, I don't want to be, I don't feel strange around Black brothers and sisters. I feel at home. I feel like we're in a family together, and I don't want to apologize for that. I want to feel. I want to have a clean conscience. I want to have a good conscience. I want to have a heart of hope. I want to be active and faithful. And I don't want to live my life with guilt or apologetically. I want to be wise. I want to be sensitive and all that kind of stuff. But I think that the heart of this story is a hopeful vision that says like don't give up, because I think that the tempting thing culturally is to just say there's just no way, there's no hope, and we just need to give up, and we need to like just keep being scared of talking about it, keep staying away, and keep and that there's no and the big message is like you can change, we can change, it is possible to you can do the wrong thing too, you can be wrong, and like you can change and you can grow and you can move forward, like it's possible, there is forgiveness. That's a big Christian message, is like you can be forgiven. This is not a stain that will haunt you for the rest of your life, no matter what. You can change, you can grow, and you can be forgiven. I think that's at the heart of the reconciliation, is this sort of Christian vision, this hopeful vision.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate you pointing out that there seem to be, and I again, you can very easily picture these grumpy folks on one side saying, how dare you air America's dirty laundry, implying that we're a racist country, blah, 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 blah. And then there's the other side, again, the grumpy folks on the other fringe saying, how dare you imply that there can be forgiveness, there can be reconciliation. America is fundamentally racist. It always has been, always will be, no matter what we do. Both of those are very depressing. But you look at especially where people on the fringes gather, places like social media, and that seems to be a prevailing thing. So I think this sort of way where, yes, there's a problem, yes, there can be reconciliation. Nothing perfect. We're never going to reach some future racial utopia, but we can move forward. I think that's a very important aspect of it. And something you touched on that I think gives you a very valuable perspective here is you have experience seeing what racial tension can look like in America, but also in South Africa. So tell me how the South African racial tensions might have informed your view of this overall.
Yeah, it really did in a big way. I had such a heart for the Zulu people. I've like I said, that was the first church I ever belonged to. My father and a Zulu pastor together started a Zulu church in this little township called Madadeni, and in KwaZulu-Natal, and it's the place of the Zulus. That's where they are predominant. And they're this big, beautiful tribe, and they had these really significant historical divisions where they were fighting. The Xhosa and the Zulu really did not like each other, and they would fight. And those are sort of overlapped with political parties as well. You had the African National Congress and the Inkatha Freedom Party, and they were sort of like that. There was a lot going on, and there's a lot of tribes. There's two white tribes in South Africa: the Dutch, or the Afrikaners, and the English. And then there are a lot of what you could call Native African or Black tribes, however you want to say it, the Zulu, Xhosa, Northern Sotho, just it goes on and on. There's a lot there. The Zulu were the biggest. And they would have really, really intense, like, tribal divides. So that was one of the things that was frustrating coming back to America. And I was just like, we have so much in common. Like, we speak the same language. We have so much of the same culture. Like, are there challenges? Are there differences? Yes. Are some of the differences awesome and cool? Yes. It's like, great, but I just, it baffled me that, like, we all speak the same language. We have so much more in common as Americans than do a lot of places, including South Africa, where the tribes are so much more divided, or were at that time. So I just, that informed, and just having that experience, just seeing my dad's own example, when we went to South Africa, it was in 1989. and it was the last part of apartheid. Nelson Mandela was in prison. In fact, he was released from prison the day that I turned 13. My first birthday in South Africa was the day Nelson Mandela was released from prison.
Oh, man.
And so when we went there, he was in prison. When we left, he was the president. And it was an amazing time to be there, and an amazing time to be, my dad and I were often the only white folks in the Zulu townships. And it was kind of a dangerous time to be there. There was a lot of political violence. We would have messages written on the chalkboard of the school room where our church met. It would say things like, kill the white, kill the farmer, kill the Boer, that kind of thing. And that was so there was a dangerous time. So I got to see my dad risk his own life to be to love and to minister and to serve often very poor folks who were in the Zulu tribe, and we fell in love. I was with him in that, and it was very special. They had a practice then, and I mentioned this in the Found Boys sort of an introduction to the Found Boys, but they had a practice there similar to the one in America, but a little bit different. That every black man or woman would call any white person, any white male, a boss all the time. They say, yes, boss. Okay, boss. Okay. And I know that's sometimes sort of similar in American history as well. And every white person would refer to any black man, he could be 70 years old, as boy, this garden boy, this boy. So that was just completely normal practice, totally normal culturally. And my dad, instead of that, he would, anytime he met a Zulu man, he would always call that Zulu man boss. And he just did it very naturally. I don't know if he thought a lot about it. He just would. It wasn't like he was, hey, now watch me as I do something heroic. That was just him. And I got to witness that. I watched that firsthand. He would always say boss to anybody who was Zulu. And I just thought it was such a reversal. And it was so in harmony, in my opinion, with like the coming kingdom of God, this future vision. And you say, I know there's not going to be a utopia. I think there is going to be a utopia myself. In the kingdom of God.
Thank you for the correction. Yes.
I understand, like in our era, but I think it's coming. And so I think he sort of was living with that kingdom ethic, that ethic of that world that is coming, and it is acting on us now. And I think that's part of what was so beautiful about it. So yeah, that informed the way that I thought. I admired my dad for that, and I practiced that myself as well. And so I got to see, so I think something special happened there. And then there was, politically interesting things happening too. We got black neighbors, and that was illegal when we went there, and so just became the country changed in a lot of ways. And of course, going back to it's no utopia, there's lots of challenges with that. And there's lots of challenges in South Africa today. It didn't just like, that ushered in this, we still need Jesus pretty badly in the world. And I mean, of course, our politics in America are perfect, and we have everything figured out. But, a lot of other, I don't know if you know this, Matt, but a lot of other countries don't have the sophistication of
yes. If only.
But it was very formative for me, for sure.
No, absolutely. And I think that's one of the many reasons why I think, have a lot of listeners who are parents, have like middle grade, above and beyond. I think it's a great way to get your kids to really grapple with difficult issues in a way that's going to be inviting. It's going to be helpful for them. And another really interesting theme that I found in this book and throughout your work is this book is about, on one level at least, the friendship between three boys. Right. And you made it clear, and I want to make it clear, listeners, girls will enjoy this book too, but this is a book about the friendship of boys. Well, Why did you have a particular intent with making like, hey, this is about the way three boys interact with each other in this book?
I didn't think about it very actively at the moment. It was very organic storytelling. Again, I rarely think about sort of like the implications of some of this stuff. It's just like, I'm a boy. When I was playing in the creek, it was with other boys, and we were the ones that didn't mind getting dirty and getting wet and going up, and that was just like a normal thing. And I know there are girls who would love that too and enjoy it, but that was sort of my experience in the 80s. And So it was very natural. I wasn't thinking, hey, how can I exclude women from this this story? But honestly, again, looking back on it, I think a lot of, and my audience is a lot of moms, that it's the moms who are making so many decisions. And I think they're the ones that are most hungry for good stories for their sons.
Yeah.
They kind of see the challenges culturally with sort of like, a positive vision for what it means to be a boy, what it means to be a man. What is masculinity good for? What are the strengths of men and boys? What value can they be? So I actually think that I'm sort of very intentionally like to have stories where there are opportunities for boys to grow and learn and change. And I do, as a boy who didn't read that much, I think it's as a little boy, I think it's really, really powerful, the impact that a story can have on boys. And I kind of think like girls are honestly just really way ahead of boys in reading and in so many areas. So I do think boys are a little bit left behind. So the importance of giving that positive vision for what they can do and be in the world, I think it really is important. So this is a story about young male friendship and a quest and danger and nobility and sacrifice and loyalty. And I think you're right that that's sort of a theme in a lot of my stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say one of the reasons I bring it up is I've been thinking about it a ton with my writing because my oldest is in third grade, so my three oldest are boys, and then my youngest is a girl. So me and my wife were thinking like, okay, we really need to, first of all, get them interested in reading because I think you're right. I think a lot of girls will just take to reading more naturally, where you need to kind of nudge the boys in the right direction oftentimes.
Yeah.
But also, like, I'm trying to be very conscious about providing, good role models. So, like, I'm trying to very intentionally have a few characters who I think are examples of, like, masculinity done well and all of those things. So I really, really appreciate that you are ahead of me working on that because, my third grader, he's getting to Green Ember age. So watch out for that. And along those lines with the Green Ember, this is just something I was reading through them. I noticed I wanted to talk to you about, and I have you on the interview. So here we go. One of the things I'm trying to explain to my wife, who grew up with just one sister. So she didn't really grow up with this. I grew up with two brothers. This was my world. When boys, or even guys, like when we're all interacting with each other, there's this camaraderie that comes out in like busting someone's chops, like making fun of your friend, picking on them, but in a good-natured, friendly way. And I notice that is absolutely something you portray in the Green Ember, right? When Pickett and his buddies are, hanging out, Pickett does something heroic. His friends will like bust his chops about it, make sure he doesn't get too high on his horse. Tell me about this whole thing, because I think you did it really well. I'm glad there's chops busting in your work.
Yeah, I think it's just like, as you said, I grew up with three brothers. There were four of us boys and one girl. And so it was boys, and I've always played sports, which was almost entirely just other guys. And yeah, that's just a sort of a code. And it's a very natural thing in my neck of the woods is like, don't get too big for your britches kind of a thing. So you sort of need people to kind of bring you down a little bit. It is funny when somebody, because sometimes with this authoring thing, or if you're speaking at a conference or something, it's kind of maybe like signing autographs or some kind of grand thing like that. My favorite thing about that is when one of my friends, like, not necessarily someone that I just meeting who doesn't, we don't know, but somebody who knows me is just like, oh yeah. And they're just ready to hit me with something, making fun of me for using my initials or something. And that is just such a love language for me. I understand there are some people for whom they're just like, that hurts my feelings, whatever. And that's just not my experience. Like, I love that so much, and it feels authentic. And I don't like stories where it feels like a lot of modern middle grade or young adult stuff like that. There's just like endless bickering and like almost like hatred and like real significant strife all the time, like in order to be authentic. Like that's how teenagers talk to each other. And I really don't like that at all. Actually one of my favorite authors sort of slid into that a lot with this stuff. I'm just like, I don't want to listen to this. This is so tedious. So, Heather and Pickett like love each other, and even Joe and Pickett and these guys, they do love each other, but that they do express it in these what I would consider these sort of like masculine ways of busting each other's chops. And that's an opportunity for humor, and it's definitely very natural to sort of like my family, maybe too much, but I like that. That feels real. It feels authentic. A lot, I was never in a war or in the army. Tried to have a lot of respect, and I read a lot. And my dad was a Vietnam veteran. My papa was a World War II veteran. So I have so much respect for these guys. But the closest thing I've had is sports communities, playing on teams. And so, and I think there are some similarities. I've heard from them. There are some similarities. So that's my experience is based on that kind of stuff. And yeah, hopefully it doesn't go too far, but it adds a little bit of humility to characters who need it, and some humor for us as readers.
No, absolutely. Like when I read that, in the Green Ember, I was like, oh, he gets it. Like it really struck me as authentic. Like he knows how how boys interact with each other. You saying you grew up with three brothers, like, yep, that makes sense. My family very similar. I think our families we're on the same wavelength here, where we used to say like, hey, if we're picking on you, that means we like you. If we're like rigidly polite, that means there's an issue. But if we're picking on you, it means we like you. You're in. Like, well, me and my brother are friends that we've had forever, like very old friends. We'll all get together as guys, play sports together, and the whole time we're just sort of making fun of each other, poking fun. Nothing mean, nothing mean-spirited. It's all very lighthearted. It's part of like, I'm doing that because I like him. I'm showing him. I'm sure this is how I show affection. My wife thinks that's totally alien, but that's okay. That's just how guys interact, and I think you do a good job portraying the realism of healthy male friendships there.
I hope so. I think it's so cool that you and your brother worked on Red Rex together. I think that's such a cool. I'd love to hear more about that. Like, and I know I'm not trying to interview you here or anything, but like, was that something that you guys have been working on for a long time together? And was that pretty special to be able to do that together?
No, it was really, really cool because, forever I was, even back when we were kids, right? I was the writer. My brother Brian was the artist, right? Those sort of like our niches. So we've done stuff like this for a long time. Like there's actually a project. It's a smaller project. It's sort of something we do with family and friends where we write letters to our kids as like North Pole elves telling this adventure story that happened to me and him when we were kids. So I write it, he illustrates it. So we've collaborated on that stuff. And for this current project, it really came in handy because me and him have a lot of the same sensibilities, just in like stuff we think is like, oh, that'd be cool. That'd be cool. What if the dinosaurs did this? So I noticed it was very seamless because like he'd come up with the pictures like, that's exactly what I wanted. So that made it a lot easier that we have the same sort of imaginative vocabulary that we're dealing with.
You can see that. You sense it. It feels very coherent. I love that. I remember playing sports with my brother, and you see this often on fields, like with brothers, they don't have to sort of say anything, and just like, I know where you're going. I know, like, I don't know how many assists, my brother Josiah, he would just find me, and I'm right there, and he just finds me, and it's like, it's an easy goal, and it's like just this understanding. So I love that. I definitely sense that. It feels, your project feels, it's really fun because of that. I love to see it. And honestly, that's a cool, like, I think a lot of moms, a lot of people in our audience, people who are looking for these kinds of books are like, they want to see their children, their boys, maybe particularly, like love each other and get along and have a future together. And it's I think I bet you've heard from readers who are like, that is cool I hope my boys, will work together in the future. I hear that all the time. Yeah. And it's really cool.
No, I appreciate that. That is something that, I really enjoy that because, it gives me a chance to like, it's something we're working on together, right? It's not just like my little thing. It's me and my brother's project, which makes it seem a lot more meaningful to me. And I do think, I do think a lot of the reactions from the readers or the market, because, a lot of the folks who buy the middle grade are parents. And I do hope we can show something, right? It's like, I want my kids to work together on projects like this too. So I hope me and my brother can model that so that my kids do it someday. So I think that's definitely one of the best parts for me.
Have you had boy and girl readers who have been excited about Red Rex? Has it been more one or the other?
I think we've had a good mix, and that's been really good for me because, as you undoubtedly know, it's a lot easier to convince a lot of girls to read. And this seems like boy stuff. It's a boy riding a dinosaur. He has a sword on the cover. But I've gotten really good feedback from girls in the age range too, and I tried to put in interesting girl characters, so here and there, and I think a lot of it girls like to ride dinosaurs, so that appeals. But I have gotten some very encouraging feedback so far, so I've been very grateful for the girl readers out there.
The girls read so much more globally. It feels like than boys. They're so much more of a comprehensive. It feels like that's a generalization, but I think they're more eclectic readers in general than boys. I think boys are too easily put off by, oh, that's a girl book, and we know that. That's the reason, J.K. Rowling is J.K. Rowling instead of Joanna Rowling. Is she's afraid of putting boys off, and that's a real thing. So girls, it's almost like you don't have to. Yeah. They're gonna get it. Like they're such good readers. And it's funny, we're talking about boys and creating visions for like what is a good, like, this is what a good man looks like, this is what a bad man looks like. Who does that maybe better than anybody that I can think of immediately is Jane Austen. Yeah. Like, I think every boy should be reading Jane Austen. Like, again, maybe start with Red Rex and the Found Boys, and then move on. But I mean, it's this incredible vision of what like a good man is and what a bad man. And it's the same with women too. She has these wonderful portrayals, like they're so real. And you think, oh, it's just these small little stories and these small little setting, but it's so universal. These themes of what a selfish man does and what a selfless man does, what a selfish or selfless woman do. And it's like, these. I think she's just like the best.
Okay, I 100% agree with you. Jane Austen is one of my favorite authors. I think she's fantastic. Actually, the other person who agrees with us is Brian Brown, the Anselm president. Me and him, it's our project that's like someday when it all calms down, we plan on forming a podcast called Austen Bros, where we just talk about Jane Austen from the perspective of two dudes. We'll let you know when it happens. You can be our featured guest.
I'll be in the audience for sure on that one.
But yeah,
who else is in that group is C.S. Lewis.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
He loved Austen. Loved her. Reread again and again. Yeah, he loved her so much. So
yeah, I discovered her in college. I'll admit, I bought Pride and Prejudice, not intending to read it. I just wanted it on my college bookshelf so girls would walk past and think I was sensitive. Then I read it and I was like, it's actually really funny. Like, she's really good at dialogue. Funny. And like you said, Darcy is a good example. He's not. She makes him distinctively a man, right? Like, you can tell he's a fully fleshed human male, but in very different from Elizabeth, and that's why they sort of bounce off each other first. But he's eventually, toward the end, shows ways that he is a good man in a really, really interesting way. I never thought of that particular angle, but you're absolutely right.
Hey man, I'm just feeding the Austen Bros content. That's what I'm behind this idea 100%. This is good.
Well, there we go. Listeners, keep a lookout for Austen Bros. Publication date TBD. But I would love to keep talking about this, but I know you have to get back to your day, and we've already gone a little over time. But SD Smith, Sam Smith, thank you so much. Where can we find you? Where can we find the Found Boys? Where can we find the rest of your work?
Well, my address is
send all of the letters.
Just come to this holler in West Virginia and you can find me. Just come into southern West Virginia and just be like, where's that guy, that bald guy, that real pretentious guy who uses his initials?
Looking for Smitty.
Looking for Smitty. He's kind of on his high horse. He started using his initials now. I don't know who he thinks he is, J.R.R.R. Tolkien or what. But no, I'm sdsmith.com is an easy place to find me. I think I'm easy to find. That's probably part of the reason why I use my initials, actually, is because there were a lot of Sam Smiths out there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate it. And listeners, as you can tell, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire's down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Believed to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have a spare, say, 30 seconds or so, please rate and review the show right now on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.